You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 95 Podcast. This is Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network, and I hope you're having a great week. We're excited about the things that the Lord's doing as we record this podcast. This is moving toward the end of the summer of 2023, and we have some great anticipation of what God's going to be doing this fall and specifically even into next year. Many of you know that we've been doing the Soul Care Essentials conferences, and those have been going so well. Recently, Compassion International has come on board with us, and they are sponsoring the Soul Care conferences. And so we're just looking forward to the opportunities that are going to come as we move into new areas, places we haven't been before, and even some places we have been before. So we're excited about that. And I hope you're excited about your fall and what's happening in your ministry. Today, I have a guest that I think will be very helpful for all leaders, whether you're a lead pastor or a staffer, or just, maybe you serve at a church. We're going to talk today with Jamison Davis, who's with Guardian Wealth Management, and just begin to get some advice about what we can do to make sure that we are being the best stewards we can with what we got and planning ahead. So, Jamison, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you. We actually met each other. We were at the Converge United conference together back in June, and you had a booth set up there, and I had a booth set up there. And I've heard of you guys for years, but I've never had a chance to have you on the podcast. And so I wanted to kind of learn about what Guardian's all about, and then see how that could really help our pastors and our leaders that listen to this podcast. But before we do that, take a few moments to kind of let us get to know who you are. What's your story?
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been a financial advisor for about 25 years now. But for 10 years in the middle, I was full-time with my church. So I was bivocational. So I was youth pastor and associate pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously I'm very interested in personal finance and retirement planning, things of that nature. And I thought I knew what I was doing as a minister when it comes to personal finance and financial planning and retirement planning. But I made every mistake you can make, even though I knew more than most.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my mission in life now, is to help other people avoid the same mistakes that I made. And if we've made the same mistakes, which are common mistakes across the country, across traditions and denominations, now how do we fix those mistakes so that we can, to your point, be good stewards of what God has given us? He has given ministers the most advantageous tax code of any profession in America. And unfortunately, most people, one, just don't know about it, and two, aren't taking advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. What about your family? Tell us about your family.
Yes. So my wife of 20 years, and we have 3 kids who will all be in high school this year here in Phoenix, Arizona. And we have a St. Bernard poodle, and that's the family.
A what?
A St. Berdoodle, if you will.
So is it big or little?
Oh, he's a 1-year-old puppy, and he's over 100 pounds, and he's just going to get bigger. So.
Oh my goodness! And I'm assuming you keep him inside.
Yeah, in the summertime. So it's pretty hot here in Phoenix, but we still get a walk in early in the morning and a walk at night. And he's a ball of energy. And during the day, he just swims in the pool. So
tough life.
That's right.
Saint. How'd you say it?
Saint Berdoodle, Saint Bernard Poodle mix.
Yeah, living the life in Phoenix.
That's right.
So you're doing wealth management, and how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I've been a financial advisor actually, and I really focus on the high net worth individuals because, hey, that's where the money is, right? So that's where I focus my energies in my private practice. But then my pastor growing up called me and said, hey, I'd like help retiring. And through the years, I figured out the mistakes I made personally, but then I was able to apply that to him and his personal situation, fix some of the things that we needed to fix there, and help him have a successful retirement, really maximize the dollars.
How old was he when he reached out to you?
Yeah, he was 65.
Okay, so he's 65, and now he's starting on planning for retirement.
That's right.
Okay, I want to make sure I understood that rightly.
That's right. Now, I wish I got phone calls from 25-year-olds,
Yes, yes,
but typically we do get a phone call. Hey, pastor's 65. Unfortunately, he hasn't saved enough for himself. The church hasn't saved enough for himself. Oh, yeah, by the way, he opted out of Social Security,
yes,
unknowingly opted out of Medicare. What do we do?
yeah,
And so we help those folks, but it'd be a lot easier to help those folks if we had had that conversation when they were 25 versus
yeah.
65.
I've shared
Uh,
this on the podcast before. When I was 22 years old, I was
mhm,
presented with the opportunity to exempt out of Social Security, which many of our pastors have done. And I, as a 22-year-old kid, you're going, oh, great. I don't have to, they can't take that money every month or every week or whatever.
mhm,
So I had this, I say she was an older, crusty, kind of stern mother figure of a CPA who I
mm.
talked to her about it, and she said, absolutely not. You are not doing that. And I'm like, okay. And she said, you don't even have children yet. She said, if something were to happen to you, you wouldn't be able to
That's
be
right.
helped. She said,
Hmm.
you are not doing that. And I said, yes, ma'am.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so I didn't, and now, as I'm 61, and I've been observing this for at least the last 10 years, there are thousands of pastors who are entering into retirement who don't have
Hmm.
any retirement plan.
Yeah,
I don't know if they didn't think about it, or I don't want to. I want to say this because it needs to be said, but I'm not. Sometimes the Lord's just going to take care of you.
that's right.
And, and
Yep,
and yes, and he'll still take care of you, but he could have taken care of you a lot better if you'd done
that's
some
right.
things going along the way. And that's why I wanted to have you here today, because I hear too many
Hmm.
war stories of, I know one couple that I heard about in Texas where they're in their 70s and he's got cancer. So he's a
Mm.
retired pastor. He can't work. So his 70-something-year-old wife is working at Chick-fil-A, and they're just trying to get by.
Mm.
And I don't want that to happen
Hmm.
to anybody. So that's why I
No,
like to have these kind of podcasts. And what obviously what I want you to do is talk about what you do, but also, and I know you do this, we want to help people wherever they are.
that's right.
Uh, so, uh, so, uh, so how did it go with that, Pastor?
Yeah, great. Actually, he had done, some planning. So we hear a variety of plans, quote unquote, from pastors like, "Hey, I'm just waiting for Jesus to come back,"
Hmm.
or "Hey, God's going to take care of me." But really, we need to look at it like the parable of the talents. Like we're wasting what God has given us if we aren't proactive. Now, this my pastor, he had saved in various vehicles. Now, the wrong vehicles, and that's what we find most of the time is that pastors who do save are just saving in the wrong place and not maximizing the benefits that they have under the US tax code. And so we were able to put some things together, but also show him at the end of the day, I can help a pastor pay, in many cases, no taxes in retirement, which saves them 15.3% Social Security, saves them federal, saves them state, which they can get an increase of 30-40% of cash flows in retirement. And all of a sudden, we're like, oh, wow, I can retire. Oh, well, I can do what God is calling me to do. I can leave the pulpit. I can create a succession plan. It opens up the imagination of what is possible when we have those options later in life.
Yeah, I personally don't believe retirement's a biblical concept, but I
That's
do
right.
think you should take advantage of the opportunities, because honestly, it can free you up during that
Mhm.
season of your life, that what I would call the fourth quarter of your life, to
Yes.
do some really cool ministry. Go some places
Amen.
you might not have gone before,
That's right.
or like Dale, do something you've never done before.
That's
And
right.
so I'm really excited to hear the pathway. So let's just say today. Let's do a couple of scenarios. First of all, let's go ahead, since
Sure.
we've already been in that vein. Let's say today a 65-year-old pastor reaches out to let's go 60-year-old pastor reaches out to you, and they have
Hmm.
not planned at all.
Yep.
What do you tell them?
Yeah, so we start at ground zero with everybody,
Okay.
whether you're 60, 65, 25, whether you've been saving or not, whether you have a plan or not. And we do complimentary financial plans for pastors or anybody in vocational ministry. And so we waive our planning fee, and we understand their current situation. We want to seek to understand kind of where we've been, maybe mistakes we've made. Now let's see how we can correct those mistakes. So I travel around the country. I'm constantly on the road at church conferences talking about the 3 money mistakes ministers make. The first one is opting out of Social Security and unknowingly Medicare and all social insurances. And oftentimes I think pastors knew that they opted out of Social Security 20, 30 years ago, but they don't realize they opted out of Medicare as well. And so we start there. Hey, everybody probably waited tables or had a job while in college or seminary, and we have some credits.
Yeah, something
And so
vested.
something. So we look, hey, go to ssa.gov/my account, create an account if you haven't, but then you get to see how many credits do you have towards those 40 credits in order to receive those Social Security benefits. And then we think through, hey, is there are we just 4 credits away? Are we 10 credits away? What do we need to get that benefit? Now we need to do it with non-ministry worker income.
Yes.
And it's, to get 4 credits in the year, you need to make, let's call it ballpark $7,000 outside of ministry. Now, we have pastors who have taken the lawn care contract from the church, and they're mowing the lawn for $7,000 a year, and that's getting them their 4 credits. We have pastors who, we have tons of sermons, right? And depending on who owns the sermons, if your church owns the sermons, but guys can self-publish books, and then the church is buying those and giving them to the congregation for $7,000. You can. We have a lot of pastors who are coaches, life coaches, business coaches. That are doing outside counseling. So if we can get creative about how can we could get that Social Security benefit, Medicare benefit, that's the first thing we want to do. And then secondly, we say, hey, are we maximizing the 2 major tools in the toolbox if you are considered a minister by the IRS tax code? And the first tool is housing allowance. We find that, hey, most folks are not getting all of the housing allowance dollars that are owed to them in the tax code. Most people are grossly underestimating and claiming less than they should. And those are tax-free dollars coming into.
All right, so I got to ask you this question: if it's tax-free dollars, but don't we still have to pay self-employment tax on that?
Yes. So we have, if we think about our pay as ministers, top line, we have salary, and that's fully taxed, federal, state, Social Security, 15.3%. The next line down is housing allowance. We don't pay federal, we don't pay state in most states. Now, like the state of Pennsylvania, if you're a minister there, you're paying state tax on your housing allowance. And then we still have to pay 15.3% Social Security tax. The next line down is the second tool in the toolbox that most pastors actually are not utilizing, and that is something called a 403b9 church retirement plan. Because this is on this line, this is the only place I'm aware of in the tax code where a dollar is never, ever taxed. You don't pay federal, you don't pay state, you don't pay 15.3% Social Security tax on contributions that go into a 403b9 versus me. Hey, we're a for-profit company. I have a 401k. I can defer federal, I can defer state, but I still have to pay payroll taxes on any contributions into my 401k, not ministers. And so they're able to contribute tax-free, it grows tax-free, and it comes out completely tax-free after 59.5 to the extent you claim housing allowance. And so
okay, you got to slow down and do that all over again.
I know it. And
when you said to the extent of housing, I'm okay. We went from housing allowance to retirement. Now he's back to housing allowance.
So, and that's really the push and pull that kind of the whole advantage of the minister's tax code is around housing allowance and how do we maximize that while we're working and also in retirement. That's another thing most pastors, when we talk to them, they don't realize they can get housing allowance into retirement until the day they die. Because it's all about where did you earn and save those dollars, and was it doing the sacerdotal duties of a minister? Well, therefore, you are entitled to receive those dollars on a tax-free basis after 59.5 to the extent that you claim housing allowance. And so hey, there's a lot of things. This is a mistake that I made. These are all the mistakes I made when I opted out of Social Security, right? It was just part of the paperwork when I became a youth pastor. Here, we don't, here, fill this out. Here's the benefits. We don't believe in Social Security. Sign this form 4361 and, off you go. Yeah. And I didn't, and I thought I was a smart guy. I thought I would save. I thought I would have,
you're going to put it all back.
That's
you'll
right.
be in there by the time you're 40.
And we've done thousands of financial plans for pastors at this point. Not once have we ever found anyone that, one, saved enough, but two, the people that were saving, they never created a bucket to match the benefit that they receive in Social Security and Medicare
Mm-hmm.
and retirement. It's $1 million mistake, just straight line math without the cost of living adjustments that Social Security gives us. It is at least $1 million mistake opting out of that.
Mm.
So,
Boy, I know a lot of 20-year-olds that needed to hear that.
yep, yep. And so we'll, if someone says, hey, we do the analysis, we'll do the math and science for everybody. We'll say, hey, scenario one, you opt out. Scenario two, you don't. Scenario one. So we can craft a plan around an individual's situation of, hey, maybe we want to retire and move to Texas to be with the grandkids. How would that impact the plan? Well, let's run the scenarios. We can show you the impact, but all those things. But at the end of the day, don't opt out of Social Security. Maximize your housing allowance. And one way we can maximize housing allowances in retirement is to keep a mortgage. And so this is a mistake I made. I'm a Dave Ramseyite. I've taught Financial Peace University for 10 years at my church.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to a place where we paid off our house.
Yeah.
And it was a great feeling until I got my tax bill. And I traded my 2.5% mortgage for a 34% tax bill, and I was in vocational ministry. And this is what pastors are doing for 30 years into retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the knowledge of the marketplace that financial advisors, CPAs, tax attorneys that sit on all of our church boards and elder boards, they bring into the church is actually bad advice for pastors because the rules are different.
Yeah.
So
it's like this, Jamison. I remember one time when I was pastoring the church that I pastored for 12 years, and we had gotten an accountant, and because I couldn't, I so struggled. And anyone who's heard a podcast that I've done about around the housing allowance knows I get fiery about this. I so struggled with this because it was like I don't see the benefit for having a housing allowance if I'm having to pay the 15% basically on it. I don't
right.
get that. I don't understand that. So I asked my our CPA that year at the church. I said, ask her some questions. She said, Dale, I'm going to tell you the exact answer that I got. She said, I went to Columbia, South Carolina, which is our state capital, for an IRS training, and someone asked the question, when it comes to the pastor's housing allowance, and I don't remember what the question was, and here's what the IRS agent said. If you ask 10 agents that question, you'll get 10 different answers. There is so much ambiguity and confusion, and no one really knows when it comes to the pastor's, everything with the pastor's housing allowance and the government and finances. So I'm thankful that you know it all.
Yeah. Well, and that is, that there is so much disinformation and myths, and just because some CPA said it, and it's just trickled down into the church, from board to board to board. It's just so much wrong information out there. You're right. And
hey, Jamison, I know pastors that they don't even report, they don't even put on their tax form their housing allowance. They don't even account for it. And I keep telling, listen, you're still liable for that. If they ever came back on you, it's very confusing out there.
Yeah, it is. And so that's where we teach, hey, here's the tax code, and there is a lot of gray area, actually. It's not necessarily black and white all the time. There is interpretation of the code, just like there's interpretation of scripture. But there are best practices that we coach churches, boards, and pastors in order to, one, avoid the risk of audit, and also to maximize the benefits that are available to them.
That's so cool. So here I am. I'm that 60-year-old guy, and I haven't done any planning. Where do we go? Where do we go?
All right. So we say, hey, let's understand where we are, and then where do we want to go? And so what resources do we have today, and what do we need to implement into your personal financial plan? And one of those things is a lot of churches, and especially if a pastor has done zero planning and saving, well, we need to establish a 403(b)(9) church retirement plan for pastor. And we need to start contributing or deferring part of our salary into that. And oftentimes we can work with the church. So I'll go meet with the church board and I'll say, hey, this is not what you have to do for pastor. I'm going to tell you what you can do for pastor, and it's entirely up to you what you're going to do. But a lot of times, hey, pastor started this church, grew this church, built the building, and we probably didn't pay pastor what we should have for 30 years, but now the church is in a place where we can. And so can we supercharge pastor's retirement for the next 5 years and give him a good launch into retirement and create a healthy succession plan to make sure that the church is here for another 100 years?
Mm-hmm.
And one of those things that we can do is if you're over 50, so this is where a 403b-9, it's different than a 401k, it's different than a 403b-7, which we find a lot of churches have. It's the wrong plan. You want a 403b-9 church plan, and there's a lot of benefits to that. One being that if you're over 50, you can put as much as $73,500 into that plan today, completely tax-free. And then if you're over 59 and a half, you can take it right out tax-free. And you're not going to pay Social Security tax. You're not going to pay federal. You're not going to pay state. And this is one way that we can supercharge a pastor's retirement. And in a 403b-9, you can do what's called discriminate, meaning I can pay the senior pastor more than the youth pastor. Mm-hmm. It's very flexible. Mm-hmm. You can craft compensation. You can create golden handcuffs to keep that young succession plan on board while we're helping pastor transition into retirement. And so we kind of look at all of that. Hey, where are we? Where do we want to go? What's the capabilities of the church? And then what can we do within the pastor's household to maximize those dollars? So we'll review it. Let's talk about your housing allowance. Are we taking advantage of everything we can, like internet as a utility, like my cell phone bill as my house phone, like pest control and lawn care, like that storage unit that's across town that holds all the junk that doesn't fit in our house? Well, that's housing allowance. Cleaning supplies. So we work through that whole gambit of issues to maximize dollars today while we're working, and we want to maximize dollars in retirement.
That's so good. Here's what we're going to do. I want to take a short break, and when we come back, I want you to talk to the 20-year-old who's just starting. Okay,
great.
So we'll take a short break. Good. We'll be right back. And back here with Jamison Davis with Guardian Wealth Management. Just again talking about things that most pastors don't want to talk about. Because most of us just aren't ready, as you said earlier. We didn't prepare, we didn't plan, and for me, the thing you've said the most that really or stuck out to me the most was that of all the pastors you've ever come in contact with, none of them really, when they opted out of Social Security, they didn't really have a plan, and I've seen that. But today, let's just for a moment, because we have some young guys that listen and girls that listen. I'm 20, 23, 24 years old. I'm launching into ministry. Give me some guidance, man. What do I need to do?
Yeah. Well, so these are things I wish someone had told me when I started as a youth pastor. One, don't opt out of Social Security. We politicize Social Security and all that good stuff, and it has its issues. But really, there's still no better annuity program in the world than Social Security and Medicare today. And so it has its problems. It's imperfect, but we have never found anyone that was able to save to match the benefit that you would receive in retirement. So don't opt out. Okay. Second is maximize housing allowance. So, my church actually, one of the churches I worked at early in my career, they set just like a low bar arbitrarily. Like said, hey, everybody gets $10,000 housing allowance across the board. Doesn't matter if you had 20,000 housing expense, or it doesn't matter. Now you just need to be armed with information to go into that meeting with your executive pastor, senior pastor, church board. Say, hey, look, I know because I listen to Dale Saylor's podcast that hey, up to 100% of my pay can be classified as housing allowance. And you can't,
now, up to 100%, because I've always heard 50%.
No, there's just some crazy random stuff. I've heard people say, no, it's 30%. No, it's 37%. No, it's 50%. No, it's 100% of your pay. And this is what we coach churches and church boards to do, that, hey, housing allowance has to be pre-approved by the church board, or has to be in an offer letter, or has to be in a budget. Those are the three ways the IRS will accept that. And so every December, I think church boards are always scrambling. Oh, we got to meet. We got to approve housing allowance for pastor for the next year. And what you can do, church board, and we have a template that we can send people if they want it. It speaks to this effect that, hey, pastor can receive up to 100% of his salary as housing allowance until further notice. And you just put that in the notes and you set it and forget it, and you never have to have another meeting
I
about housing
doubt very
allowance.
many pastors, I could be wrong, but I doubt very many churches sit down in December and redo that again. Maybe the
Yeah.
large ones do, but I don't think they do in our space.
Yeah, but they should, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is best practice, and you're right. Most churches are not following best practice. So that's what I would say. Hey, don't educate the church on how to help you as pastor. So as long as the church isn't setting some arbitrarily low number, now it's on me as pastor to add up all my housing expenses. So this is what I ended up doing. I did this very thing. I educated the church on the tax code, said, hey, January 1, I want 100% of my pay is housing. And I'm going to pay my own, quarterly estimated taxes for Social Security, 15.3%. And then December 31st, I looked back on my year and I added up all my actual housing expense. So I never missed out on, hey, we didn't account for the furnace going. We didn't account for the roof leaking. We didn't account for our air conditioning. True story in Arizona. I came back from last summer, both air conditioning units gone. I mean, $25,000.
That's you
right?
got to fix those in Arizona.
And you had to fix those in Arizona. And when we lived in Michigan, where I'm from, you had to have a furnace, right?
Yes, sir.
And so, but you don't ever think those bad things are going to happen. And so that wasn't accounted for in the pre-approved housing allowance the previous year. So now you're out of those tax-free dollars. And so, young pastor, don't opt out of Social Security, maximize your housing allowance, and don't pay off your mortgage. And as a Dave Ramseyite, as a Financial Peace University coach, this is, I get a gasp in the room when I talk about pastors. We have done thousands of financial plans. Never has it ever made mathematical sense for someone to pay off their home. And this is where the tax code and retirement is different for pastors. Should die with a mortgage. And it's because as a financial planner, there's a couple things that make it really hard to create a really accurate financial plan. And one is the unknown about future tax consequences for our clients, because we don't know what the next administration is going to do. We don't know what taxes are going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's my opinion that taxes are going to be higher tomorrow than they are today.
I agree.
Right. National debt on a hockey stick trajectory. I just don't see a scenario where income taxes are less. So, but as a financial planner, that's why we love working with pastors, because I get to take that whole tax liability out of the equation when we do a financial plan, because we want to match any distributions coming out of a 403b9 to the amount that the pastor is paying for housing allowance. And if we have a mortgage, that means we get more tax-free dollars into the plan, which increases the probability of success mathematically in retirement.
So I'm retired at 67, and you say I still need a mortgage.
Yes, sir.
As a retired person.
If you have funds that you can receive as housing allowance, yes.
Okay.
Now, if you
realize this is all foreign, so that's why I'm reacting.
Absolutely.
I've never heard any of this.
I know, and this is the reaction we get. We travel, we do workshops and breakout sessions and lunch and learns all over the country, and there is a long line of folks, including the church CPA, that's like, you got to break this down for me again, because I've never heard this. And I'll take the CPAs right to publication 517. You can go to irs.gov/P517. Check out, this is the tax code for pastors, and not enough people work in this space, and therefore the knowledge is not broadly known or accepted. And so that's our mission, is to get knowledge in the hands of ministers so that they can maximize their tax code. And then I would say, hey, young pastor, you need a 403b9 church retirement plan. Don't have a Roth. No pastor should have a Roth. Why pay? You get paid, then you pay your taxes, then you put into a Roth, then it gross tax deferred, comes out tax free after 59.5. But pastor, you never have to pay taxes on your retirement dollars. So why would you?
This is one of those things where it's just like you've heard the gospel for the first time.
Yep.
It's like, why didn't anyone ever tell me this?
They
didn't know.
Yep. Well, and these are all the mistakes I've made. I'm
sure everyone listening is saying the same thing.
Yep. And they're common, they're cross, and like, I know how it feels. So I've made the mistake, and it's just like, oh, it's like a punch in the gut. And but we can move forward with right action to
Sure.
create a successful retirement.
Yeah.
Even if you don't think, well, we haven't saved that much, or we don't, it is amazing what we can do when we put all the pieces together, and how we can increase cash flows for folks.
Well, you got to start somewhere, and it doesn't matter whether you like I've always heard, bad facts are still facts, whether you like
That's
them or
right.
not. But you
Whether
got
you like them or not.
but we're trying to equip you today, which is why I had you on, to
Mhm.
try to help them to understand what is available. Because listen, I don't do a lot of preloading of questions and things like that when I have guests on, because I want to be surprised just like everyone else is. And right
Mhm.
now I'm sitting here thinking, I got to get with you when we get off this podcast and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
young person, any other things that they need to do moving forward?
Yeah, and then I'd tell every young person, like I know it's tough. Ministry is hard, right? And nobody does it for money. And it's really tough thinking about, well, how can I put a couple $100 away each month when I'm, my wife stays home. I got 3 kids. I got
Hmm.
seminary debt. I make 30 grand a year, if that, right?
Hmm.
And I tell like, your future self will thank you for
Hmm.
every dollar you put into a 403(b)(9 plan, because it is never taxed. And basically, if Walmart was offering gift cards, for that are, worth $1.50, but you only paid $1, how many would you buy? I mean, as
Hmm.
many as you can, right?
Hmm.
And that's essentially what young pastors get to do. Every dollar they put into their 403(b)(9, they're saving 15.3% on Social Security. They're saving their federal tax rate. They're saving state tax, and not just today, but into retirement forever. And so your future self will thank you for every dollar you put away, even though I know it's hard right
It
now,
is.
even though
It
you
is.
got to buy diapers and you got to,
Well, it's just hard
take
when
care of
you're.
the
I
family.
had 3 kids, man. I had to sit down with my daughters when they became teenagers and say, "Listen, you're gonna have to get a part-time job because I can't buy clothes for you because
Hmm.
teenage girls got to buy all the new all the new stuff, and
Yep.
I can't do that." And so they had to do that because it was tight, it was hard,
Yep.
and when I hear this stuff, it gives me the heebie-jeebies just remembering how difficult it was, how we never had enough, and
Hmm.
we I don't even know if frugal's the word. We did what we could to get by, man. It was tough.
Survival.
So
Yep.
I hear all these great ideas, but then I'm hearing everybody else out there going, man, I don't know what to do. So my first thought would be maybe this is when you need to consider being bivocational. We've
Mm-hmm.
been really, really kind of beating that drum over the last year. We've got
Hmm.
one of our teammates, John Sanders, has founded a company, it's called Entree Pastors, helping
Mm.
pastors to do entrepreneurial things while they do ministry. So if
Mm.
I'm doing entree pastors, if I'm doing an entrepreneurial type job, then
Hmm.
that frees me up to route all my ministry money into this account. Is what I'm hearing.
Yes, and I would say probably, other than the giga churches, mega churches, I think
Yes.
most pastors across the country are bivocational, just out of necessity.
Well, and if
There,
they're not, it's coming. It's
it's
definitely
coming,
coming.
right?
With the the baby boomers are moving on, and it's coming for sure.
Yeah. And so that, which I love. So I was bivocational. We couldn't live on just our pastor's salary or the
Mhm.
standard of living we wanted, and so I always had, I was always a financial advisor as well. But the great thing about bivocational folks is that we can take everything in the household, your ministry income, your non-ministry income, that business, rental properties, whatever you have going on in your world, and we can move things around in a tax advantage manner, to put as many tax-free dollars through your church retirement plan, if we have other means of living. So we can maximize the entire plan, not just the ministry stuff.
That's so good. So here you're sitting down with a pastor. He's discouraged. She's discouraged. They're like, man, it's hard. And then we're dealing with with the stress. And it's not just pastors. Everyone's dealing with the stress on being on this side of the
Hmm.
pandemic. Uh,
Hmm.
what would you tell them today to encourage them?
Yeah. uh, it can be better. If you can give us your time, that's all it'll cost you, but we can show you how life can be better today, and absolutely in retirement.
That's so good. So if we haven't made a plan, we start a plan. The key to it is just being patient. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think it's about being proactive. It's one,
Okay.
understanding what you can take advantage of, because first is knowledge. I mean, really, it's, God's people perish because of lack of knowledge. And that is what it comes down to. There's so much disinformation, or we have a lack of hope. Really, I think that's what we deal in. We give pastors hope that they can take their wife on vacation, that they can have a retirement, that they can transition from the pulpit into whatever else God is calling them to. They can create a succession plan. Because ultimately, I think a lot of churches, we've seen it, especially during COVID, where, church of 1,000 goes to a church of 100 to a church of 10 until there's one elder with the key left to the church building, because the pastor didn't think he could leave the pulpit. And he couldn't even think about taking care of himself, much less creating a succession plan in order to keep that church redeeming and restoring the world in their community till Jesus comes back. And so that's what we're really like. We're in this for kingdom impact. We want to make sure that young guys stay in the game, right? What's the Barna? I think Barna had a stat. It's like 80% of seminary grads are no longer in vocational ministry after 5 years.
The scary one, the most recent one that came out, the scary one for me, which, that is that 50 or 48% of pastors under 40 are considering quitting. Now that's from stress, but sometimes the stress from the outside and what's happening with the COVID or the pandemic responses, but sometimes the stress is because they're broke.
Well, and it's all right.
It's all that.
We're not. It is. It's, hey, ministry's hard.
It is.
My wife and kids, they want something better. I want to send my kids to college. We all want the same things, right? That everyone else does. We want to provide well for our families, and we want to have secure retirement. And we want to have hope for the future. And that's what we provide. We sit down and we show pastor how things can be better, and then they have hope that, okay, I can continue to serve the kingdom in a vocational manner and know that my family will be taken care of and I'll be okay, and I don't have to sleep on my daughter's couch when I turn 70.
That's so good. So I want to ask you two things before we wrap up the podcast. I want you to think about this a minute. I want to hear the biggest horror story that you've ever had to deal with, if you can think of it, and then we want to follow that up with the best story you've ever heard, or that you know personally. So I want to because there's just a lot of you said you're basically a dispenser of hope. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. In the Message translation of that verse, hope deferred makes the heart sick. It says unrelenting disappointment will leave you heart sick. I would say that of my 41 years of ministry, I would say that 30 years of that I had unrelenting disappointment. Yeah, I'm in a wonderful place today, and honestly, partly it's just because I didn't quit. But I'm in a better place than I've been in a long time. But I had quadruple bypass heart surgery at 53. I had a widowmaker, 100% blocked in one artery, 90% blocked in 3 arteries, and didn't know it. And my surgeon, I asked him, how did this happen to me? I said, there's no heart disease in our family. I'm not severely overweight, and I never smoked except in high school, and that was just 6 months. But I didn't inhale. I mean, I didn't know people did that. And I said, how does that? He said, hypertension, high blood pressure because of your vocation. Yeah. I said, are you saying the ministry almost killed me? He said, that's exactly what I'm saying. So the reason I wanted you to tell these two stories is because there's people right now that are at a place where they're like, oh, come on, man, don't give me hope. Because it's just so bad. And that's why we do this podcast, is to give them hope. But can you think of one it just was a terrible situation?
Yeah, man. I mean, we have so many on both sides of that.
I watched you when I said that, and you were like, "Oh, dude, I've got not one, I've got 50."
Right. Well, I can tell it's kind of so I've dedicated my life now to just serving the church and with retirement plans and serving pastors with personal financial planning. And it will help anybody, but that's all I'm going to do now with the rest of my life. And I can tell you the moment I realized that, because we were helping all kinds of folks, but so I helped my pastor. He referred to me another pastor and another pastor. And so, now I'm on your podcast, that's just kind of how it grew. But I got referred to this pastor in the state of Texas. I won't say the church or his name, but if I did, you would know who it is. Very well-known pastor, grew started a church plant from nothing and grew it to many, tens of thousands of people, just a huge church. Now, some things happened, but one, we didn't follow best practices. The church had no idea how to compensate him. He didn't save enough. The church didn't save enough. He didn't have. This is the man that was sleeping on his daughter's couch, and that's why I say that, because that is just burned into my brain. I went to meet with him at his daughter's house, and he was sleeping on their couch.
Hard to believe.
And this was a man who gave his entire life to the kingdom, that
Yes.
changed tens of thousands of people's lives through Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And this is not what he wanted. Is not what his daughter wanted. And
No.
they were both just like, can you help us?
Yes.
And we did. We were able to help some, but we didn't necessarily get him off of his daughter's couch, though, unfortunately. And so that's when I was like, you know what, this is what's wrong. Like this is just not right. And I am going to fight to make sure that this does not happen anymore. And so we have a lot of work to do. I can tell you, I'm the only guy at these church conferences teaching about this. We need more people understanding the tax code and how to help ministers. We need more financial advisors, CPAs, tax attorneys. But that is my mission now because of that. So, and I can tell you 1,000 success stories of truly, we sit down with folks and they don't think they have enough. They do feel completely burned out. They are exhausted. Their marriage is hanging on the edge of a knife. And they do need a transition. And that's probably the healthiest thing for them and the healthiest thing for the church. But they don't think that they can leave the pulpit.
Yeah.
And we show them a path to do so, either right then and there, because we can take all the different pieces, like, hey, we saved in an IRA way over here, and we got this old 401k over there, and hey, let's roll whatever we can into a place where you're going to receive tax-free income and retirement, and poof, that just increased their cash flows by 30%. And they say, oh my goodness, we can retire. We can't, and we help people maximize their Social Security benefits, and how you file can have a major impact on the total benefit you receive. And so we just put all the pieces in place and show them the path of where they can, think about something else than just pure survival in the moment.
And so many pastors, sadly, that's where they are. It's just survival. Their church is hanging by a thread. I believe we're in a reformation of how we do church. I think it's changing right before our eyes, and sadly, so you would think that churches would really be more proactive at taking care of their pastors. Yet, a lot of pastors would say a lot of their churches have been proactive at keeping them poor. And so what we have to do, Pastor, is you've got to take responsibility for your finances. You've got to take responsibility for your retirement. This is one of the things we're teaching in the Soul Care Essentials Conference. Our third session, we talk about being bivocational, because you can't just depend on the church to take care of you, because so many, and again, in the small and mid-sized church, so many of them don't and won't. And so I am so thankful that you and I crossed paths. I hope that many people will reach out to you because of this podcast today. I need you to please send me any links that you want to have in the show notes. I'll put your email in there. Guys, if you're listening and you're like, man, I really want to get in contact with him, I didn't hear anything, or how to get, just reach out to me at 95 Network, and I will forward the information. But man, I appreciate so much what you're doing. As we wrap up today, let me ask you this. What gives you hope for the future?
That I think the younger generation is far more intentional and proactive about their personal finances, that they are questioning the advice that they get. And I think that is a healthy thing. Yeah. And they are seeking information, because information is so readily available now compared to 30, 40 years ago. And so that is what gives me hope for vocational ministry, because I truly believe that the local church is God's plan to redeem and restore the world. And oftentimes in our Western society, that means we have a paid vocational person to lead that church. And that person deserves to get paid. Ministry is the hardest job I've ever done. It is far easier being a financial advisor than a pastor. And so whether the church is going to take care of them or not, at least they are armed with the information to take care of them and their families, so that they can keep their head down and focus on their ministry, knowing that they do have a secure financial future.
Well, I appreciate so much what you do. It's really cool for me to find someone who's understands I guess I could call you an expert in this arena, but also understands the pain of pastoring and the difficulty. And none of us go into this because we're trying to get rich. None of us go into this because, it's just something to do. We do it because there's a divine calling.
Yes.
But I will say this, one of the things we are seeing is a lot of pastors are reaching the end of their ministries, their retirement years, and they're bitter because they weren't taken care of. And sometimes they blame God. And it wasn't really God. It was bad advice. And again, even as we talked on this podcast today, there's so many things that there's so much confusion about. So folks, reach out to Jamison, set up an appointment. He's already told you if you're in ministry, there's no cost for that consult.
That's right. That's right.
And get your finances where they need to be so that you can enjoy your ministry years, because I believe joy will attract more people than a big old mean, crusty bitterness.
Amen.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you again for joining me.
All right. Thanks so much, Dale. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.